started. I know that some people may still be showing up, but you know, that's fine. But we want to keep our schedule as best that we can. So who Allah brought, who He has brought, and that's cool. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nusalli wa nusallimu ala sayyidina Muhammad. اللهم زدنا من نافية علمنا من نعم يا رب العالمين. And Allah, we ask you to increase us in knowledge, and we ask you to teach of those things in which we are not aware of. So, when we had our first Islamophobia talk, was it September, December, and we were discussing a response to Christianity. And I think that went quite well, and you know, I was happy. I walked away from that talk and that teaching session upbeat, because I don't usually do that when I ever leave one of my talks. I don't always leave upbeat. I'm very critical of my own performance, and so I hope today Allah will give us tawfiq to make this successful, and obviously everyone who has helped in creating the PowerPoint and the handouts and everything. Allah reward you, and I don't need to mention you. Your acts are recorded with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, I just read some books and sent in some notes, and they put everything together for me. And so, if there's a glitch with the PowerPoint, it's not my fault. So I absolve myself of that. Alhamdulillah. If afterwards you would, basically you got a handout also. I believe that handout is made from the PowerPoint, so it should follow in sync. There are spaces there for filling in. There are some questions that are asked. I think there's questions that put there to sort of pose yourself. Are you getting anything from this series of presentations today on the topics that we'll cover? And I initially, according to if you've seen the poster, there were certain things mentioned on the poster. For example, Dhimma, for example, the people who are under a state, essentially the minority, a discussion of minority non-Muslims under a classical Islamic rule. Those points will not be discussed today, because as I was preparing for this, I had to sort of shift in how I thought I wanted to present things. And those things, well, inshallah, in the future, I would hope that we will discuss more of those points in greater detail. In front of me, I have some books, some of the books that I was using. This book by Ibn Abdul is a very well-known Shafi'i medieval scholar on his Qawaid al-Ahkam. It's a book that is a well-known and often cited text. In any discussion you might see in a list of cited texts on issues of Islamic legal theory, Maqasid al-Sharia, that is objectives of Islamic sacred law, and it's one of the medieval texts that was the earliest ones that was actually penned on that point of discussion. Dr. Muhammad Hashim Kamali, who is probably one of the foremost contemporary living Muslim scholars who writes books in issues of Islamic law and legal theory, and issues of human rights, issues of equality, liberty, these issues that are within the Islamic discussion. The translation of Ibn Ashur's his Risala on Maqasid al-Sharia is a good text. If you can buy this text, any of his books I recommend to get. If you know Arabic, of course, get the Arabic text. And another book I use, this is authored by Kamali. This is one on freedom, equality, and justice in Islam. It's from the Rice University Library. This one is a nice book. I actually did enjoy reading this one, Democracy in Islam. Democracy is one of these bugbear words for some Muslims. If you're on Facebook, at least on my Facebook, and I seem to get a lot of people recently who are members of Hizb ut-Tahrir, and so I keep getting all these, especially from Australia. There's a Hizb ut-Tahrir contingent in Australia, which I knew and they're always very active after all the Jummah, especially in Auburn, always handing out flyers and stuff, and always having, you know, some type of protest or something going on, and always putting up postings on Facebook that are very, like, you know, like juxtaposing democracy and Islam, as if democracy was this totally evil, satanic thing. And then, so that's a really good book. It's actually from Rice. Actually, this whole series, this Routledge Studies, Routledge University Studies in Islam and Political Islam, there's a whole series of these blue books. And they're actually quite good. I don't know if you go online, if you're a Routledge, if you're a student here at Rice or University of any university student here, these Routledge Studies series that deal with Islam are actually quite interesting. So you might want to you know, spend some time. Of course, I have my Quran. Don't leave home without it. And then I have this book, another book, which is the Sharh of the Mujalla. If you're familiar with later codification of Islamic legal maxims, the Mujalla is an Ottoman text. It's actually Ottoman Turkish. It's a 5-volume text. And Jawad Pasha, from the 1850s to the 1870s, he took most of the works of Ibn Nujaym, and also, for example, other works, for example, of Abdul Aziz, for example, and his works on Qawa'id, taking the maxims or legal principles, the Qawa'id of Islamic legal theory, and codifying them into a text that would be available for Muslim judges in Ottoman law courts. And there's an English translation of it, which is this English translation I bought. Okay, so this is the English translation, and this is one volume. This is volume 1 of 5 volumes of the original Ottoman. So the Ottoman text actually is even larger than the Arabic translation with its commentary. The one from Lebanon is about that thick, which is, so the Ottoman text is the original. It's very extensive, and of course you have to go read Turkish and then read Ottoman in order to understand it. I use this also for some of the sources. I'll be, what else? I will be quoting from Abu Suf Effendi, who was probably one of the greatest legal minds the Ottomans produced. He was the head of the judiciary during the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent. So this was a book that was about him, Abu Saud, and the Islamic legal tradition. I think he's important because he did something which maybe we'll get into is approach towards distinguishing as it developed between the idea of the caliph versus the sultan, which I will talk about that, and the idea of siyasiyat, or where the ruler has political discretion or legal discretion in areas where they're not necessarily explicitly Sharia-based rulings. And we'll discuss that too, because that's important. So, well, one thing is, as we start today, so these are some of the books that I've used, and a lot more, and so I just like to, you all know that, I'm not just, reading one book. I'm accessing various things, and I need to also, sort of preface this with another point. I'll probably do more than one. Is when I embraced Islam in 1982 at Purdue University, and I sort of mentioned similar things like this about that period of the 1980s for me as a convert. When you were a convert in the 1980s, and if you remember those days, well, most of you wouldn't because you weren't even born, unless you're my age when you're getting to be 50-something. And I just got a Facebook mailing from my class graduation in 1982, like the 30th anniversary. It's like, I feel really old. I was very curious what people looked like, people I knew from my days at university. They all look old too. And so I'm thinking, should I go back to my 30th year reunion and just show up as Naeem, and like, he became a lawyer, and they're still living in Newcastle, and this guy became a Muslim terrorist, and like, wow. So, sort of freaked them out. And my wife go in full face veil, and it's like, take my kids, they'll just prove it right there, that we were messed up. But when I became a Muslim, the big issues, there was a lot of xenophobia among Muslims at the time. You know, I was at Purdue, and most of the students were from overseas. The mosque at Purdue was very much influenced, because it's a very important, it's a very large engineering school, so we had a lot of students from the Gulf countries. And so Purdue University, and even today it still is, has a very sort of, I would say, Puritan approach towards Islam, the Neo-Salafia, I would call them. And and so I, you know, had friends who were fathers. One of my friends is from Kuwait. His father was the leader of the Salafi movement in Kuwait. And so I was around people who had really sort of very interesting approaches towards living with non-Muslims and the idea of what Islam was about. And so if you were in the 1980s, things were always, you know, you never called Israel Israel. It was always the Zionist entity. You know, you never called it by Israel. You never gave it that name. Even the Jew Muslim was, it was called the Zionist entity. You know, things were different. And Muslims were very aggressive. And when I went to Medina, and for the 2 years I was in Medina, you know, I met people who were jihadists, people who had been in Afghanistan fighting. Some were American converts, some were from England, from the States. I met a man who was, he and his family tried to overthrow the government of Trinidad in the early 1980s, you know, to implement Sharia in Trinidad. And so I met a lot of interesting people in my journeys in life. And so I've had an earful of hate the kuffar, they're evil, everything is all that evil West, you know, Malabag America, you know, death to America. That was one of the chants, you know, from the Iranian Revolution. So I met a lot of people, and I used to be, as you know, I want to, you know, hope I know how to change this. So, we'll flip to a picture though. Trying to find a picture here. So, you know, things like this, you know, I like this one. Everything I need to know about Islam I learned in 9/11. Nice one. I like that one. And then this one, because this would have been me, the next picture. I really could have been me at a protest in the 1980s, and it would not have been surprising. That's what I used to think. You know, I could have seen myself holding up something like that. Now, as a 47-year-old experienced Muslim, you know, when you hit 45 and that's the hump year of your life and death is closer to you than it's ever been, you might start changing. It's easy for an 18-year-old or 20-year-old at university to have a sit-in, a walkout, to protest this, protest that, you know, have our own version of an Arab Spring, whatever it may be. Because youth is full of that energy, and also youth is full of ignorance too. A lot of ignorance. This is really ignorant to do something like this. And I can talk for various reasons why. But just one of those reasons which we might think about is how the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ thought about consequences of our actions, which I will talk about later, about consequences. And a lot of Muslims don't think about their consequences. It's like Abdul Murad at Cambridge said to me, he was talking about, you know, in the UK has a lot of Muslims like to protest in the UK, and he was saying, you know, he said so many different Muslims are just, they just throw tantrums. Muslims throw tantrums. There is a spiritual immaturity for the average Muslim. A spiritual immaturity. In a sense that the virtues of a Muslim, of prophetic Islam, of steadfastness, controlling one's anger, controlling one's speech, thinking of consequences, are not always on every Muslim game plan. And so it's not surprising, you know, you see, you know, that we see things in the news, and over the years, I mean, for me, it's been a few decades now, more, of a lot of angry expressions from angry Muslims. So when I was in Medina, I got a lot of angry Muslims around me. And some who I know, I met there, you know, who were fellow students at Islamic University of Medina, you know, are now buried in Bosnia or in places like that, because that's what happened to them. They went off and did their jihad, and they died, and some of them, you know, you know, shaved their beards, moved back to London, and are probably selling, you know, fish and chips. They've just totally flip-flopped, you know. They burnt out of their zeal of their Islamist thing. And I like the word Islamist too, by example. I was looking at the word Islamist, you know, like I'm an entomologist. So if I'm an entomologist, that means I must use insect in a very negative way. I want to impose insects upon you. Because the idea, the word for Islamist is a person who is a man of literature on the area of Islam. That's what it actually means. That's what an Islamist is. But now it's a pejorative term, just as jihad is a pejorative term. You know, we don't want to use that word jihad. You don't want to name yourself mujahid now or or jihad now, because you might be a not a GI Joe but a jihad Joe, because that's a beautiful word which is now sullied. It's like using gay in 1920 had a pleasant meaning. You say today, for many people, it's a negative meaning. And so this is, we have to understand that the things I'm talking about is also me showing I have gone through a transformation how I see things. And this is not, as I go through this day, this is not going to be an apologetic. I'm not going to be one of these Muslims trying to just give you an apology or some response or to placate what's outside this room right here, because we're in an election year, and there's Islamophobia. And jihad, for example, is a beautiful concept. Sharia is a good word, and even though it's forbidden in Turkey, in Turkish law, for example, and you cannot use that word. It's one of the it's a banned word. So you can, for example, in Turkey, you can't use the word Sharia in a book, in a sense, or a public lecture. You can't advocate it. You can advocate Deen Ilahi, God's religion, but you cannot use the word Sharia. There's a term in Turkish, the Şeriatçı, a supporter of Sharia, as opposed to a Turkçu, which is a supporter of Atatürk. So when I was in Turkey, I'd be very careful of the words that we use in talking about things, that you don't say things. Even scholars there, Mashayikh, they don't use that word. You have to be very careful. So even in a Muslim majority country, one has to be mindful. So that's something I want to share with you. So my own background. So the things that I'm expressing today, and as I have grown as a Muslim, the things I'm presenting today are things that I would agree with. I'm not just giving you things here just to fill in space and time, but things that I would agree with and advocate as sound understandings. I base it on my understanding over the years of trying to acquire knowledge of this religion. So understand it that way. I'm not just saying these things just to say it just for the sake of spending some time with you on this beautiful Saturday, but there's a purpose in it. I think these are things that we need. So I'm going to give you some knowledge. I think some of these are stuff you will have known, some of it you will not have probably known. We will have points of stop points for asking questions. And I will say, okay, I don't have it on the PowerPoint, but they'll be like, okay, we'll stop. Any questions on that topic, and then we can move on. I don't want to, talk about cows. We've covered cows. Now we're doing monkeys. I want to talk about monkeys now, not cattle anymore. So let's keep that in mind. So these are the things we want to cover today. And when we get to the issue of jihad, qital, and harb, I also want to, I want to cover a couple, I want to cover this Ibn Taymiyyah's Mardi fatwa, and then I also want to cover Sheikh Muhammad Atiqi's recent position, a fatwa he gave from Oxford. And I also then want to cover an Arabic text here. This is from Roland Abuti's Al-Jihad fi Islam, Kayfa Nafhamahu wa Kayfa Numarisuhu. Jihad in Islam, how do we understand it, and how do we apply it? This is a contemporary text. If you know Roland Abuti, he's probably one of the most foremost, I think he's a brilliant Syrian scholar, one of the most brilliant scholars we have today. And his works, the Arabic is always very complicated. And he has a discussion on a well-known hadith, because we want to talk, we'll cover a verse of the Quran, which is Surah At-Tawbah, verse number 9, which is the ayat of the sword, okay, which is one which many people who advocate jihad in the sense of using jihad as a means to assault non-Muslims, whether they're combatants or not. This verse in Surah At-Tawbah has been abrogates any previous verse of the Quran that may imply having sulh or peaceful relations with non-Muslims. And then this hadith, well-known hadith, umirtu an aqatla nas, I have been commanded to fight the people until they bear witness that there is no God but God, is the hadith which is cited for that. So I want to go through Roman Bhutti's discussion of this hadith to refute the usage of this hadith, which is also a refutation of the usage of that verse from Surah At-Tawbah. So we want to cover that too. But I have to do it from the Arabic, because this book hasn't been translated in English, and so you're going to have to bear with me as I go through it today, inshallah. Okay? So those are the things I want to cover today. So have fun taking notes. So some is not written here, some is not on here, for example, so that's all right. So let's just go then. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Any questions on that? My intro? That was a big intro, wasn't it? Okay, bismillah. So, defining Sharia. So here I like that. So the first thing is, I have this quote here by Imam Haskafi. Imam Haskafi is a well-known late medieval Hanafi jurist. He wrote Radd al-Mukhtar and then Ibn Abidin in the 18 teens and 20s did his commentary on that. And his Dur al-Mukhtar is also one of his texts, so he has different texts, by the way. So whoever does not understand the people of his times is ignorant. And what he's saying here is that we have to contextualize our jurisprudence and articulations from sacred law in the context we live in. So that's important. You have to contextualize your situation right now as you discuss things. Though you may be relying upon medieval texts or late medieval texts or into the modern period. And in modern, I use the word modern, I'm talking about in our contemporary Western use of the word modern. I'm talking about from the late 15th century forward, until the 21st century we're in. That you have to contextualize yourself. Just to quote, for example, something from the past may not make it applicable today. To give you an example, if you take Sheikh Keller's English translation of the Salik, Three Lines of the Traveler, you'll notice that he gives you the complete Arabic text. But what does he not translate? He doesn't translate any, he leaves the Arabic text, but he doesn't translate any of the fiqh that deals with slavery or issues of slavery. He doesn't remove them from the original text, but he doesn't consider them relevant in a contemporary discussion, so there's no need to translate them. So that's a good approach. And we have to also understand, and which I will try to make that clear today, is this idea of Sharia is it is fluid. It is fluid. And it's not a monolithic crystalline thing that exists. And we have to be mindful, and I can stand, I get a big soapbox right now to understand that. And you need to share this with your friends. When you hear someone says, Islam says this. What does Islam say about that? That makes no sense at all. Islam doesn't say anything. Now you can quote the Quran, and you can quote a hadith, and you can say Islam says that. And you can quote, and it's easy to quote verbatim. For example, umirtu an uqatila nas, and you can walk away with that. But what does it mean? How do you apply it? Well, that's the problem. That's a Muslim giving you an interpretation, an understanding. So when you say Islam says this, what you're actually saying is Muslim scholars and people of knowledge are saying probably many things on that point. And you should leave it at that. Understand that. It's when we live in a time where our Islam has been reduced and reduced and reduced To where we go around saying Islam says this and Islam says that. We're not even living in reality at the moment. Because there are voices amongst the Muslims. It's like the idea of Sharia. What is this Sharia? I was listening to BBC Radio. I'll give you an example. As you know, they had the first parliamentary meeting after this, they had the first parliamentary sessions after, it's been a year now since, the Arab Spring for them, and the Ikhwan Muslimun and the Salafiyun have majority of seats in the current parliament. So what they did was a BBC reporter went down to, not Cairo, went down about 1,000 miles up the Nile, which is south, right, to some villages in Aswan, and was doing a report of visiting these villages that had a very large Salafi community there. And in the Salafi community, the two men that according to the reporter, one was a man with a big beard and a long thobe, and his friend who didn't have a beard. But they were talking about in the report about how when Sharia comes, when we start cutting off people's hands in Saudi Arabia, we will see a dramatic decline in theft. And then the man without the beard was saying, you see this is what's happening in Saudi Arabia, he said. Well, obviously the Saudis, you can go online and find they don't do amputations, by the way. I lived in Saudi Arabia and I saw one beheading in public. I saw one public beheading in my years in Saudi Arabia. Have you ever seen that before in your life? You've seen it on TV, right? Have you ever seen one? You should see one live. Because the Muslims come out to Jummah, I swear you can sell popcorn at the public execution. Because they're all like, I want to see it, I want to see it. You could sell tickets for it. And it was outside a Jummah mosque, it was in Jeddah. And it was a Jummah mosque which has a Maidan outside it, which is a public execution zone. And the man was accused from Pakistan. And he was accused of bringing in drugs. Of course, it's a capital punishment to bring in drugs in Saudi Arabia. Whether or not he did or not, I don't know. I don't know the court case. But I saw his head become severed from his body. And it was impressive, to say the least. Made me think, At that time, of course, remember, I was a different Naeem. I was a different Naeem, you see, than I am now. Because if I was thinking then, it was like, and I would make dua for the man, Allah, forgive him for sin, make this a tawbah for him. That was my intent. I wasn't there to gawk, and then afterwards say, well, wasn't that really cool? Did you get a picture of him? I wasn't there for that. I was actually making dua for him. But I didn't really think, I think now, I might think more like Tariq Ramadan about, well, shouldn't we even apply that now in our time? Because why was this man bringing drugs in from Pakistan in the first place? What economic situation was he in that might force him to want to bring drugs to a wealthier society in order to survive, maybe economically? Those are the things we should think of. But you see the man on the BBC interview, the you're talking cutting off hands, he's thinking, and I heard this so much, I heard this argument so much, you hear it today from Muslims, when Sharia comes, things will get straightened out. And of course, they mean what? When we stone adulterers and veil women, and we cut off hands, we'll have justice. And we'll all live together, worshiping Allah, and praying for each other, and doing charity and good works, and looking out for justice, and yeah, really? Because this is how simplified we see it, so many people. So simple. And that is not the mindset you ever would understand from the earliest Muslims who had knowledge. Even the Prophet himself saw something. Okay. So, we need then to understand the idea of Sharia itself in our minds. We need to readjust what it means. What does it mean? Because it has different meanings. And even the common words you use every day in your religion, Islam, Iman, for example, have different meanings. It depends on what context you're using them. If you want a good understanding of that, all you have to do is read from Ibn Rajab's commentary to Imam Nawawi's 40 hadith, when he does a commentary on the Gabriel hadith, he goes to a detailed analysis of linguistics, where sometimes Islam can mean Iman, and sometimes Iman means Islam, and in different hadith, in different verses of the Quran, because they are interchangeable meanings at times. But the average Muslim doesn't think this way. And we don't even look at the number of people. This has been advertised for how many days now? And who shows up? Because no one wants to show up. Because we would prefer to be jahil, ignorant, and our little ivory towers of our understanding of this religion than actually trying to understand what God wants from us. And if you don't have knowledge, then you have nothing in this deen, because everything is based upon knowledge. Even if you're a Sufi, even your personal experiences in your spiritual journey have to conform to what the theologian says. You cannot take your experience and trump the theologian. So if you have an experience in your spiritual journey that says that God is creation, well, that's a wrong experience, because this is not what the theologian says. So you let your own experience be trumped by a text or a verdict outside you, though your personal experience is telling you to the core of your being that the jurist is wrong and you're right. That's not reality. The jurist is right and you're wrong. So, on that point, for example, that's a broad statement. So, we have to understand our situation. So, Ali, can I think? Oh, I can do like that. So, here's another one. So, there's behead those who. So, I like the guy in the picture covering his face. Maybe it was a cold day. I'm okay, it was a cold day. He's got gloves on. But maybe he's hiding his identity. But in England, it's the land of CCTV cameras, and they're going to find you, for who's holding that sign. Of course, if you do that today, and this is what Muslims seriously. And I lived in England for a year in Bradford, which has the largest Muslim concentration of any city outside of the Muslim world. It's in Bradford, England. There are about 50,000 plus Muslims in Bradford. I mean, you have no Urdu to go to the bank. I go to Barclays, and I was thinking Urdu, and I always joke, I came to England to speak English, and had learned Urdu, it's like, it was, it's fine, Urdu is a nice language, but that's how it was, and I had a lot of things like that living there. There's a little enclave of Muslims. And of course it's like an enclave, a border enclave of Deobandis and Brailvis and Tabligis and Hizb ut-Tahriris and Salafis and Jihadists, all living on the same area and making takfir to each other. You're a kafir, or you're an innovator, and it was a wonderful experience. But how I came a good curry and biryani and kebab, so the cuisine negotiated the obscene. So, alhamdulillah. So, as we are now in the election year, I want to quote Newt Gingrich, who may be our new president. We hope not. We should have a day of prayer that he doesn't become our next president, because it's all we need. He should, for our laws, he should be stoned. For his, fidelity problems there, and he publicly, of course, from his perspective, as a Catholic now, the blood of Christ has taken care of that problem, of those infidelities, But for us, public proclamation of adultery is, pretty much. Anyway, so, but I thought, he was speaking, in July 2010. The American Enterprise, I love the American Enterprise Institute, one of those, homegrown places, right? And obviously they're very anti-Islam. You can go to their website, you can go to Jihad Watch and all those places, those fun websites. And he was with his wife, and this is what he said. So I admire deeply Ayaan Hirsi Ali, because she is one of our great advocates for Islam today. She's an expert And you know, she's like one of the darlings for those who are the Islamophobes. She's a darling for them, so I'm being sort of, you know, not neutral about this discussion. Who has done as much as any one person to serve as a personal witness and testify to the concepts I'm going to be outlining. The fight against Sharia and the madrasas and mosques, which teach hatred and fanaticism, is the heart of the enemy, a movement from which the terrorists spring forth. I studied, stop there, don't read ahead. I studied in a madrasa in Turkey for years. I studied the same texts when I visited a Dar al-Ulum Banuri town in Karachi in 1999 in November, because I was thinking about going to study there. After the earthquake in Turkey, I thought, well, now I should leave Turkey, so a place that's seismically safe. So my sheikh was in Medina, and he made an istikhara for me if I wanted to check out Pakistan to go. So on his istikhara, he did that actually in Mecca. It was okay, so I went to Pakistan for 3 weeks. I got intestinal problems while I was there. And I met some wonderful people at Dar al-Ulum Banuri town. It's one of the big Dar al-Ulum Deoband madrasas. I didn't go to the green turban people, Allah bless them. I didn't go to them. I didn't know much about them at that time, so I'm sorry. I'm sure we had a totally different experience. I guess it was the mosque with all the Christmas lights on it. And it was a big one there downtown Karachi, lots of Christmas lights on it. I thought, wow, that's really weird, really Christmas lights on it. Anyway, I wasn't very familiar with that, with you know, the Braille movement, mashallah. So, I mean, mashallah for them, I mean, mashallah I didn't know. And I went there, and they were nice people, and I was saying that their curriculum was basically the same as I was studying in Istanbul under modern Turks. And there were a lot of students there at Dar al-Ulum from Afghanistan and from the frontier, northwest frontier province, you know. But you know, the three weeks I was visiting, I didn't pick up anything weird. And when I left, you know, it's like, you know, they're reading, you know, as I thought about the experience, I think they were reading the same books I was reading, Hanafi fiqh and Sarf and Nahu and Aqidah. And, you know, so why did I turn out like this and some of them turn out like that? I don't know. Well, I do have some ideas. So, madrasas aren't honestly bad places. Necessarily. I mean, I went to one, and I don't think I turned out too bad. You know, you all disagree about that, but I personally don't feel I turned out too bad. Okay, I think I'm a pretty level-headed person. It's time we had an actual debate on this. Really, on madrasas, like, you know, the heaps of them out there, you know. One of the things I'm going to suggest today is a federal law which says no court anywhere in the United States, under any circumstance, is allowed to consider Sharia as a replacement for American law. Let me draw a sharp distinction between those Muslims who live in the modern world and those Muslims who would radically change the modern world. Radical Islamists, there's that word Islamist. I'm an Islamist by the definition of what the word actually means. I'm a man of literature and of letters of Islam, I believe. I'm an Islamist. Not as he uses it. I believe in one living God, and I believe that God has revealed of His will in divine revelation in the Quran, and Muhammad ﷺ articulates that for us and templates it out for us. That makes me an Islamist, then alhamdulillah, I don't mind the IST after the word Islam. It's not a problem with me. But radical Islamists, you know, and it's like this have to go together, so I don't know, want to impose Sharia on all of us for legitimate reasons. For their legitimate reasons, obviously. I mean, for Muslims, you know, Islamists wants to impose it. Let me be quite clear. You can respect your adversary without agreeing or giving in. They have profound, deeply held beliefs, and one of the great challenges for secularists is they can't understand the level of passion that a belief which is derived from an underlying religious form leads one to have. And that's true. It's very hard for a secular person to understand a Muslim, just as it's hard for a secular person to understand a fundamentalist Christian, or an Orthodox Jew, or an Orthodox Hindu, or any quote-unquote orthopractic person within their faith tradition. Which is why, frankly, deeply believing Christians and Jewish Americans have a much better understanding of what's going on than do secular individuals in deracinated universities looking out of the ivory tower or trying to wonder what it is that would lead people to kill themselves and having no comprehension of the emotions and the depths of passion engaged. I agree. It's funny. On that point, I would say, yeah, well, you know, these university people who study Islam, I wonder, anyone can write books on Islam. Anyone can write books. Kamali is okay. Other people, and it's, when Islam is your job to understand intellectually. There's good in that, and I think we can benefit, but I think it's also, we have to be sort of, as a practicing Muslim, we need to not always, just take it hook, line, and sinker on that point. Sharia in its natural form, I like this now, has principles and punishments totally abhorrent to the Western world. So I want to talk about today is, I want to talk about some of these underlying principles. Are they really abhorrent? Now obviously there are punishments in Islam which are abhorrent. I agree, they are tough. If you could ever really apply them, because as we all know as Muslims, it's almost impossible to apply the laws, the hard punishments, which I was going to talk about, which I'm not talking about today. But I can say this right now. Even from within the context of the legal tradition, it's all the conditions that are placed up there to apply the penalties of Islam, the hudud, are almost impossible. So for us to think, for example, there was this movie. It was this movie about the Ottoman Empire, and in the scene of the movie, this kid is caught stealing something, and the janissary comes up, and he just grabs it and cuts his hand off, and that was in the movie. It was what do you call that what do you call that justice when it happens at the moment? What's it called? There's a term for that in English. Huh? Come on, you university smart people. Huh?
Swift justice?
Not swift justice, it's called something else. At the moment it's done. Well, obviously that has nothing to do with Islam. Maybe ultimately a hand being cut off, definitely. But summary application or execution of it. It doesn't happen that way. It can't happen that way. It can't. First of all, it would take a judge to make that determination, not a soldier, by the way. Even the movie itself, which isn't a Hollywood movie, I think it was a Turkish movie, got its facts wrong. It was just one of those Hollywood versions of Islam. And I think a lot of people are getting there's Hollywood version of Islam. And of course, we have Muslims living in their fantasy Islam. Their version of what Islam is about, what God wants us to do at this moment. And, of course, without deep reflection and knowledge, you can easily make, and I'll show some of those mistakes today that we have to deal with. And in a sense of textual errors in documents, or a hadith I will quote, which you're not going to find in the 6 major collections of hadith. You won't find it at all. But if you don't have the hadith, you can butcher the religion without this hadith as a measure to withhold the application of the penalties. But you won't find any of the 6 canonical collections of hadith though. So if you just live in Kutub al-Sitta, the 6 collections, you missed out. And if you do find it interiorly, but it's considered weak, therefore you would have rejected it. If you are a strict person when it comes to rejecting da'if hadith, as some people are, for good reasons. I will not question that, the reasons, the intention, but the application of mine. So, an underlying basic belief, which is that law comes directly from God and is therefore imposed upon humans, that God imposes upon us, and that sounds really negative. And no humans can change law, no humans can change it. That's a fallacy right there. Humans can change the law. But I'll explain that, what I mean by that. Without it being an act of apostasy. I don't know what books he was reading to get this information. And he used to be president. I hope not. is a fundamental violation of a tradition in the Western system. So I want to talk to you about the Western tradition, which goes back to Rome, Athens, and Jerusalem, and which has evolved in giving us freedom across the planet on a scale we can hardly imagine, and which is now directly threatened by those who would impose it. Another point of his lecture. So I think we are faced, I don't know what, and so that's where I stopped. And I think it was the quote. When you recognize, for example, that Sharia requires 4 male witnesses to rape, in the absence of 4 male witnesses, the complainant is herself guilty. And I was going to talk about that. Ali brought up, he sent me a document on the restructuring or redoing of penalties in Pakistani legal system about this issue. But not getting into that, I won't have time to cover that. But it's on my computer if you want me to bring it up, or that document, I have it somewhere. But the point is, that's not true about this statement of his, for example. And there's the, I have it here, I should look at my notes there, shouldn't I? This help. This idea of zina al-jabr, that's forced fornication, which is rape, which is, some jurists did say, they argued a case that since it's called zina, you have to apply the penalty because it's called zina. So that was an argument because of a linguistic usage of a word. But what it actually means, and this has been understood, and when you look at the deeper discussion, is that any woman who is forced, some Maliki scholars said that, well, if she becomes pregnant from a rape, then she's guilty, which seemed rather almost nonsensical. And I agree, I will agree, you can read things in juridical works that are nonsensical. And just because it's in a work of a well-known jurist on some point, it's not written in stone. It didn't come from Mount Sinai on 2 tablets. It's an ijtihad, a statement, an effort of a scholar, and it can be wrong. So we have to understand it. Anything I'm telling you can be wrong today. Okay? Now, I would accept that. I'm not a fool. But we have to be careful also, on this point that just because a jurist has a position, because I will bring up some points today on the maqasid of Sharia, where is there benefit for us to even take that position if it's available for us? But this statement of his is wrong. So if he's gone to Miss Hirsi Ali to get his information, and she was like, his source, well, she was probably wrong too. But when she and Irshad Manji come together, wow, they become like experts. And I'm sure they're experts on their own. Maybe they're hooking up, at the bar, I don't know. But whatever the thing is, they're not experts. They be experts on witnessing abuse. Abuse. I have no problem with that. But that you're an expert on defining religion, I would question it. Because, we have to be very careful. We can talk theory here about Islam. We also have to understand we do have problems in our Muslim community and globally, and there are issues there that need to be worked out. And but it's not going to happen here, and it's not going to happen today. These are some things that are in place that would take generations probably to alter. I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, in the late 60s and early 70s, Americans were really bad at throwing trash on the roads, man. America was trashy. Highways were trashy. There was trashy or trash. It's like traveling in Saudi Arabia today, from between Mecca and Medina. The highway was full of plastic bags and trees everywhere. It was throwing plastic bottles and bags. Okay? And America was like that when I was a kid, when I was little. And then when it was the environmental movement of the early 70s, and we had this education process to educate Americans. We learned it in school, we saw the advertisements, and we saw change. People started not to throw stuff out of their car window. So today, if you see someone do it, you freak out. you freak out. You get mad. I'm driving on the road, and I see, he must be an immigrant doing something like that. Because, you know, people just don't do that anymore. Because what we did 40 years ago. And we have to be educated on a national level to teach us not to throw trash out. So what about Muslims trying to, when you have a mishmash between religion and culture at times, and you can't set, for example, the idea of honor killings. How do we separate these things? And yet, at the same time, for example, Abu Sa'ud, for example, if you read his fatwa, he justifies honor killing, which I found very interesting. And the reason he justified it, apparently, is because of the fact it was part of the culture and he couldn't do away with it. So it subsumed. It was like, it was included. So honor killing has maybe nothing technically to do with Islam, technically, but the concept of honor does, definitely. And it's easy to cross over between the concept of honor, which is a maqasid of Sharia, according to Al-Qarafi, which is the objectives of preserving honor. And you already have this concept of honor already, of a woman's body, as being, you know, a domain of male dominance, and representing, if it's not guarded, it becomes dishonorable for the family. It's easy to see even where that can cross over. And it did when he gave some fatwa answers, you know, in the 16th century, as a jurist as he was. So the point is, there are things that, you know, if someone said to me, for example, is honor killing Islamic? I would say no. But has it been subsumed in it? Yes. For some Muslims, yes, apparently. Is that a problem? Yes. So, but then of course I can go to the U.S. Constitution and find that black people are still considered 2/3 and still in the Constitution. But they don't follow that law. But they didn't erase it when it came to census taking. It's still there. It's an artifact because once it was a reality. But doesn't mean that, you know, does it mean, though, that one day we can go back and repeal other amendments and then bring back that one for census taking? I suppose theoretically it does. If you get enough votes on the House and Senate that you need in order to repeal something, an amendment, I suppose we could go back there since it's there by the fact it's there according to the founding fathers. So even with our, you know, our hooted up democratic constitutional government, you know, there can even be inherent problems there if one wants to find them. So as Muslims, you know, we are always in a process of change, in the sense of seeking out what we should be doing, is seeking out what's best for us in our time, for our people, our co-religious and others. I make it as a general statement. So, first thing is about the universality of this this sacred law, which I haven't really, you know, gotten down to, you know, discussing in details, you know, yet and defining it. So I need to take a break for a second. Any questions on anything that I've covered? No? What time is it? Well, I've been talking about an hour. You want me to stop talking for a few minutes so you can like get up and take a 5-minute break? Or you want me to continue talking until maybe 11 o'clock or something?
Students, please, if you need a break, you can start your appointment straight off.
No? No? You guys are here? Okay. Okay, I'll continue then. So in this verse in Surah Al-A'raf, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ إِنِّي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ إِلَيْكُمْ جَمِيعًا. So that's one thing you should understand, is that, and this is nothing new for you, but people need to understand this, is that yes, Muhammad came to all mankind. This is not, it's not a geographically limited message, it is a universal message. And we know this as Muslims, but you need to, here's your evidence for it, there's a verse, make note of it, you got your handout, that's something you need to know. And Sahih Bukhari, a messenger has been sent. He said, a messenger has been sent to each community individually. I have been sent to all of mankind. So we understand Muhammad has this universality about him. That means then that the concept of ummah is extended to all people. All people are part of his ummah. Whether or not there are those who have come to it as Muslims or accept his call, or they're still waiting to do that. But that's something I think as Muslims we should understand. I think most of us understand that. Okay, we understand that. So I'm not giving you anything new probably in this verse. Can we read that? وَيَحْكُمْ أَهْلُ الْإِنْجِيلِ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فِيهِ وَهُمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. The point of this verse is when you go down to the third line, جَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ شِرْعَةً وَمِنْهَاجًا. Allah has said that we have placed amongst you, or for you, minkum ja'ala min, place for you, shir'a wa minhaj. So the idea of the root of the word sharia, this is one of the mentionings in the Quran, the idea of shir'a and minhaj, this idea of paths and places to walk, which we'll get to. Okay, so that's why I put this verse up there specifically because of its using of the usage of the verb shir'a from the verb shara'a in Arabic. Okay? And here we have some then from Surah Al-Hadid. لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رَسُولَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابِ. We have sent down our messengers with al-bayinat. That's also one of the names of bayinat for the Quran itself. What I mean, ma'ahum al-kitab wa mizan, the scripture and the scale. This idea of qist, which we'll get to, the idea of justice and equitableness is there. وَأَنزَلْنَا حَدِيدًا فِيهِ بَأْسًا شَدِيدًا وَنَافِذُ النَّاسِ. This is Allah mentions He sends down iron from the sky. Some commentary on that. And then the next verse that we have there is number 18 particularly. ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَا عَلَى شَرِيَةٍ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ فَاتَّبِعْهَا. So follow it. So here the actual word sharia itself is mentioned in the Quran in Surah Al-Jathiyah, verse number 16. And Allah Ta'ala commands us here in this, and actually He's commanding the Prophet, which is a universal command for all of us, but follow it. Ittiba, obedient following. This is what that word technically means. And don't follow the hawa. So the idea that the sharia and this idea of sharia sort of juxtapose the thing called hawa, the idea of capri. And that's something I think that we need to take away from this, at least this verse, is that there are numerous hadith. The Prophet warns us about following our hawa, that you follow your capri. Now one of you believes that his hawa, his that which is in your jalba, in your current nature perhaps, that you have in yourself, this inclination as you have towards things. And so until your inclinations, your hawa, are in this idea of following what Muhammad brought, your faith isn't yet complete. The fullness of faith isn't there. So for a Muslim then, the idea of disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, shir'an or shari'atan, in a legal construct is important. But but we have to extend this idea though, because it's not merely a legal meaning here. Let me see if I can find that. Let's see, we'll get to that one. So let me cover these two right here for you. So Tariq Ramadan, and this is a book of his, it's a pretty good book. When I was with him in 2004 in Sydney, he gave me a signed copy of this book. I just realized that, when I was looking through it, he had signed it for me. He and I were on a speaking tour together in 2004 in Sydney. First time I went to Australia. He said, a Sharia on the basis of the root of the word means the way, the path leading to the source, and outlines a global conception of creation, existence, death, and the way of life it entails, stemming from a normative reading and an understanding of scriptural sources. It determines how to be a Muslim. So the idea then is that God has sent down something. And of course that's the Quran. That's their first clue there. That is, if there's this thing called Sharia, it's embodied in the scripture that has come. So one might say then, in a larger understanding, the Quran is the Sharia. This is for us, maybe keep that in mind, that the Quran is the Sharia. That's a broader understanding. But then it means also that Muhammad is also the Sharia, because he is also part of that which has come from God. He has sent to us a messenger, for example. So these two things, the Quran and the Prophet, in that understanding, are Sharia for us. In a sense, they are the means to return to God. They are our points of connectivity with God as God is. Not God as we may think God is, but in a sense how God has conveyed knowledge to us directly, that we can have this interfacing with Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, but he says, Sharia for jurists is the corpus of general principles of Islamic law extracted from its two fundamental sources, the Quran and the Sunnah. And then we have our understanding of as a legal tradition. And that's what Muslims understand by Sharia then, is this idea of a sacred law. And though that is true, that's a jurist's understanding. That's not necessarily a pure Quranic understanding of the word. So keep that in mind. So if you're talking with someone, you need to make sure someone understands, that you draw this level, between, which we'll get to that, I'll just do that right here. And then Abu Sa'ud, for example, in this text by Colin Imber on Abu Sa'ud, which I thought was okay. The general word for law is shar', or to give it the form in common usage known as Sharia. This term has both a metaphysical and practical usage. So that's the idea. The metaphysical, this knowledge which has come from God, shir'atan wa minhajan, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And then the practical usage, which is the concept of a sacred law that the jurist speaks of. In the metaphysical sense, the Sharia is a law of God, which is ultimately unknowable. And this is what what's his name? He's in University of California, LA School of Law. No, he's at Georgetown. He wrote The Great Theft. He's the well-known Mutazilite. Huh? Yeah, huh? Yeah, Abu Fadl. He does talk about Sharia this way. Sharia has this, that idea of Sharia with the capital SH, which exists in the mind of God. I don't like that word, mind of God. Personally, that's very Mutazilite. They always hung up on the intellect. So God must have the mind like that too, apparently. But he uses that. He uses it in I know his book, The Great Theft. That's why we stood out. Khal Abu Fadl. So yes, he uses that term. So I can't. I may not agree with him in everything he writes, but I don't disagree with the fact that he's knowledgeable. But the point is, he uses the idea that Sharia is the idea of that which is with the knowledge of God. So in a sense, it's inscrutable in a way then. We cannot circumscribe God's knowledge. And I think any Muslim on a base level understands that. That which is with God, and it extends beyond our capacity to truly circumscribe it intellectually, comprehensively. Because we are creating things, and the Creator is His true nature extends where the creation doesn't extend to. We'll leave it at that. But he says here, the science of jurisprudence or fiqh represents the efforts of the jurists to discover God's law, and in this sense, legal writing are works of fiqh, or rather than of Sharia, works on jurisprudence rather than statements of the law. in practical usage, our Sharia means simply the law as jurists have enunciated, as distinct from secular law, which rulers also have promulgated. That's true. So we might have this concept of Sharia, right? And we might have the concept of siyasi, or qanun. And the word siyasi is very much a term used, and qanun was used by Ottoman jurists. The idea of siyasi being these two being at the discretion of the sultan or the ruler, or that not necessarily are direct from Sharia or Sharia as a work of jurists, the fuqaha, in deriving the Sharia through fiqh, for example, using that language. So this is, I think, I like this statement. It gives you, it does sort of ground us in how we want to see things. And other statements, Ibn Ashur in his treatise on Maqasid al-Sharia said that the main objective of the Sharia is to establish a strong community with a stable social system and promote the orderly functioning of its affairs by achieving its welfare and preventing evil. So you want to seek the maslahah, and you want to avoid the mafasid, the things that bring us, the word amal salih, something which is a right deed. That's the maslahah. You're seeking the welfare. And you're trying to avoid the mufasid, the things that bring fasad or corruption. And you want that on a communal level. On a communal level. For everyone in the community. Everyone in the community, Muslim or non-Muslim. This is an objective of the sacred law. And it does it on many levels, which we will cover today, inshallah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, Man amila salihan min dhakan aw untha aw huwa mu'minun. So Allah mentions whoever does righteous. So the idea of being solid, and that's such an important word. That's one of those words, as a Muslim, you really need to understand the verb salaha. Because it is, I say that there are certain, if you ask me, there are certain words in the Quran that, are in the tradition that you should know. Salaha is one of them. Qama is one of them. Khalaqa is one of them. Amana, Salama. These are all words that I think are very important. But these three are so important because they really are interchangeably used linguistically in the Quran and the Hadith tradition to various things. For example, khalq, idea of creation, and the creation of idea of character traits, sulah, whether it's sul, reconciliation between factions, husband and wife having a problem, between warring two men fighting or whatever. Sul, whereas amal salah, something meaning a right deed. Something which is correct, the concept of righteous or rightness of action. Qama, the idea of sirat al-mustaqim is a derivative of mustaqim, a derivative from that. Something which is straight, which is upright, qiyam and prayer, for example, aqim al-salah, establish prayer. These are very important words. There are certain verbs in the Quran which are used in many ways, which become sort of like the key semantic platform of God's discourse to humanity in the Arabic language. And I think these are some of them. So you really should be curious about this, actually. You should actually be very curious about this. This uses of words, the language of God. So man amila salihan, he who does rightness. Right? So Allah says what? It's going to give you what? Hayat tayyiba. You're going to have nuhinahu. We will give him, cause him to live a right life, a hayat tayyib. God wants us to have tayyib. Inna Allah tayyib, Hadith says, وَلَا يَقْبَلُ إِلَّا tayyib. وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ أَمَرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ بِمَا أَمَرَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. God is tayyib, right and pure and good, only accepts that which is right and pure and good. And He has commanded the believers that which He has commanded what? The messengers. So having a life that is tayyib, that eat food that is halal and tayyib, right, is what God wants for us. He wants us to have this. And even something as brutal, if it had to come to that, of an amputation, for example, its objective is only that tayyib life. Even that. Okay? Even that itself. And a Muslim has to really understand that. And others need to understand that too, that we're not a bunch of screaming barbarians. Most of us aren't. They're the ones that have drones with their names on them. Yeah, they're being that's the new warfare, right? They're taking out the military, coming back, and it's going to be the new military, a more lean military, lots of technology, and fewer foot soldiers and more getting you when you don't know it. Right now, there's probably one coming here towards us right now. What's going on? So Naeem mysteriously goes off the highway. Join a conspiracy, you'll understand what's going on. Allah Ta'ala says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ, and hold fastly together, all of you. Let the تَفَرَّقُوا, right? And you can read it here, these are verses that you're familiar with. And listen to this. وَذْكُرْ نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ. The idea of نِعْمَةَ اللَّه is so much. Allah reminds us in the Quran, Bani Israel, remember the نِعْمَةَ اللَّه, this ni'mah of Allah. Allah has given us this ni'mah. Ni'mah are abundance of provision and good things for us. Something that brings you ni'mah, something that brings you joy when you see it, and pleasure to you when you experience it. This is what really God wants for us. He doesn't want us to have, life is such a drag. I'm tired of being a Muslim. This thing is just so hard, and what's it all about? God doesn't want us to have doubt, doesn't want us to have these things. Obviously, I don't believe that at all. I really don't believe that. I could probably start racking my brain and come up with lots of evidences scripturally from the nusus, from the principal scriptural sources, Quran and tradition, to support this belief that I have that God doesn't want me to be a really oppressed guy. Doesn't want that for me. I may myself choose that in my own self, deprecating way, but I don't honestly he wants it for any of us, for any person. They'll be allowed to choose it. But that's Theology 101 discussion for me today. So what it says, what? When you were enemies, إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَعَلَّفَ. When you were enemies, so even when you were bumping heads, He wanted you. أَلَّفَ, He bring together and bringing together. That's what the Talib collective, right? That whole movement, in the Bay Area. Is what? Is that where ta'leef comes from the verb allafa. It's the masdar, right? The idea of bringing hearts together. Bringing people together. Bring yourself together, right? Baina qulubikum, between your hearts. SubhanAllah. Allah wants us to have a good life. And we may choose otherwise. So, Sharia refers to all the elements of a proper, i.e. righteous life. This includes moral behavior, proper respect towards God, correct belief, personal piety, and so on. In other words, it means the right way to live one's life as a Muslim and conform to God's will. We all would agree with that. But look at this. What is Sharia? I borrowed this from Abdul Malik. If you know Abdul Malik, he's very active in the UK, and does all of the books of does all the publishing of traditional texts. And he has this on his, I'm going to stop, this is where I'm going to stop right now, we're going to take a break. So, what is Sharia? Well, there can be more than one answer to this question. So look at this picture here. The idea of Sharia is this big thing, and it has two sources. So Sharia is Quran and Sunnah. It's fiqh, which comes in, the fiqh, to apply yourself intellectually to look at the two sources, the Quran and the Sunnah, to apply yourself to extract an understanding. That's fiqh. So, fiqh equals understanding, jurisprudence, comprehension, the huge collection of juridical opinions, fatwa by jurists, fuqaha, in regards to application of Sharia. Requires extensive knowledge of the sources of law. And so Sharia is represented by a set of principles and methodologies for the production of legal rulings. That's true, we'll cover some of those. And it encompasses a variety of schools and approaches. It has different madhahib, different paths that you go on, on your madhab, you're going on your way in order to navigate the Quran and Sunnah to understand, what does God want from me right now? How do I find the rida of Allah, the will and pleasure of God, the irada and rida of Allah in this moment, in this activity? Well, that's what the jurist is doing. It's based upon the sources of Sharia, or Sharia as it manifests itself, the way of God, the Quran and the Sunnah. We'll stop here, and then we will continue. You guys have a little bit of a break right now. Okay, so I see no one's getting up. Okay, I'll get up. I get up anyway. I'll let myself warm.